whole story.
Good evening and many thanks for watching KTN News. Welcome to this edition of Planet Action, your #1 previous show that talks about issues to do with the climate. The climate change does exist. What it is we must do to be able to change the tide that continues to ravage the world. And even as we speak right now in the country, heat waves being reported across the country and also in our neighboring countries. The countries like South Sudan have just suspended school due to heat waves to a maximum of 40 degrees Celsius. This is happening because of climate change. My name is Dennis Asset. A little bit later, we'll be having a conversation on matters to do with water security, carbon credits, how we can take advantage of carbon credits to be able to fund water resources in the country. That conversation a little bit later. But now let's go straight to our top story. These are Taita Taveta conservation groups have received awards for a job well done in growing trees, protecting water sources and cleaning towns as a motivation so that they continue conserving the environment, as Hezron Kibari now reports.
Well, as a way of promoting conservation here in Taita Taveta County, a section of conservation groups have been awarded for what they have been doing for the last 1 year, and this includes some of the schools and also community groups. And now we'll be getting an opportunity to hear some of their sentiments concerning efforts of promoting conservation in this county.
Tumeanzia asubuhi ya leo kukusanya taka katika mji wetu wa Mwatate. Tumekusanya taka tukaweza kupata taka nyingi sana. Kuna sehemu ambazo zilikuwa na uchafu mwingi na tukaweza kukusanya taka hizo. Tumemaliza shughuli hiyo, tukaenda katika shule ya msingi ya Kitivo, tukaweza kupanda miche ya miti pale, miche 200, kwa sababu wakati huu ni wakati wa mvua. Tunaamini kwamba miche hiyo itaweza kukua vizuri. Tukaja kwa zoezi, tukaweza kutunza wana mazingira wa mwaka jana ambao waliweza kufanya vyema katika kutunza mazingira kwa mashule yao. Tumewapatia vyeti ili vikaweze kuwasaidia kutambulika kule mashinani kwamba wao ni watunzaji mazingira.
Lengo la hii ni kukuza ile asilimia ya miti nchini Kenya ambayo ni kama 10%, na tunataka tuwe kama nchi zingine kama vile Japani wako na zaidi ya 64%. Tunataka kufuata mtindo wa dunia ili tuondoe ile swala la tabia nchi. Sasa hali ya joto ni nyingi, watu wanaathirika na pia na magonjwa mbalimbali. Hali ya hewa imekuwa si nzuri. Kwa hivyo sisi kama wana mazingira tumeamua kwamba tuweze kuboresha hili swala la kupanda miti, na tunaanzia katika shule za msingi ili na mpaka za chekechea mpaka shule za chuo kikuu, ili watoto waanzio katika hali ya msingi, kwa sababu wakianzio katika hali ya utoto basi watashika hiyo nidhamu ya kupanda miti na hali ya mazingira itaboreshwa.
So huyu mtoto ambaye ameingia na akajiweka katika the best environment ambayo inaitwa fertile soil. Qualities of a fertile soil, sitaki kwenda hapo, si mnazijua. Imepata sunlight, imepata kila kitu. Hii mbegu inasemekana ilizaa in 160 bla bla bla. Si mtu alibeba akapeleka nyumbani. Those are lessons we can learn from the trees zenye tunapanda. That today kama tumeenda kupanda miti pale, na kama tumemake blunder ya kupanda huu mti wapi kwa thorns, si lazima tuende tupalilie huu mti. Wakati ule mnapanda miti shuleni, si lazima muzipalilie. So watoto wenye mmekusanyika hapa ambao ni learners plus your patrons, we should learn from the environment na tuweze kujiendeleza sisi kama watoto.
Leo hii tumetoa zawadi kama Taita Taveta Child Support. Sisi pamoja na S Africa tumeweza kutoa matangi 4 ya positions 1 kwa sub county, na pia tukatoa trophies 5 ambazo zimeweza kupeanwa mashule na patrons siku ya leo. Na umuhimu wa hizi zawadi ni kupeana motisha tu kwa hao watoto shuleni pamoja na patrons, wapate moyo wa kuendelea zaidi na zaidi na kutunza mazingira. Wamepewa chepe, wakapewa majembe na ya muhimu tena certificates ili ziweze kuwasaidia katika maisha yao. Kwa hivyo lengo letu ni kwenda mbele, tuweze kuona zoezi hili linafanyika kila mwaka tuweze kutunza hao watoto ili wapate motisha wa kutunza mazingira, na si leo tu vile tuko hapa, kwa shule zao na kule nyumbani mahali wanatoka. Kwa hivyo ndio lengo letu sisi, ili tuweze kuwa na hii Taita Taveta Schools Environment Day kila mwaka.
Basari. Na jana tumelaunch bursaries za 10 million. Wale wanafunzi ambao wako hapa wanatoka Mwatate na Taita Taveta County, naomba mfanye bidii, na Taita Taveta County tukishirikiana na gavana wetu pamoja na MCAs watawapatia support. Sawa. Tukija katika mambo na mazingira, nataka kusema to all partners that we are going to give support. Mimi kama MCA Mwatate, mkija Mwatate, you have my 100% support katika mambo na mazingira.
Well, as you've heard from the stakeholders, they are saying they are hoping through the awarding of the conservation groups and individuals will be promoting conservation across the country. Reporting for KTN News from Mwatate, I'm Hezron Kimari.
Thank you, Hezron, for that report that shows what Kenyans are doing out there. Governments, that is the Taita County government, making sure that the environment is preserved. The environmentalists who are playing their role, school children, the CBOs, the CSOs, all coming together, being recognized for a job well done. And that leads us to our conversation. These are on matters to do with climate change, water security. And in studio with me is John Nyagwencha, CEO Aqua Clara. Welcome on set, John. And just from that story that you're watching right now, you've seen Kenyans going out of their ways in making sure that they preserve the environment, that they plant trees, and not just plant trees. We've had that lady talk in terms of taking care of the tree and making sure that it grows. Just how important are such initiatives when taking care of the environment and fighting climate change?
First, thank you for having me, Dennis. It's a great pleasure to be here. I think first is to appreciate that there is a growing level of awareness across the country in matters regarding climate change. As you can see, even remote rural communities, from older people to young children, taking that responsibility. Because they appreciate now, I think, more than we did before, what that really means. I think in our generation, we are seeing now the severity of climate change, even in areas where we had sufficient water through rainfall before, there is prolonged droughts. And so I think what I learned from that first is that there is an increased level of awareness, and that is something I think that is beneficial as a foundation that we can tap into to address this challenge.
Mm-hmm. And now let's go into the conversation right now. The reason why we are doing all this in making sure that we restore our biodiversity is we grow these trees, making sure that that we have the minimum agreeable level of carbon cover, that is having trees that are out there. I mean, it is so that we restore that which we destroyed. And because we've destroyed the environment so much, there is the aspect of water security. In Taita Taveta, water is such a big problem. Yeah. It is one of the most driest counties in this country as we speak. And when we talk about water security, how bad is it in the country?
I think the first thing we have to appreciate is that Kenya is already a very water scarce country. I think up to 3/4 of our country is either arid or semi-arid. With the onset of climate change, that is only going to get worse. Because even the 1/4 that we would have traditionally said had sufficient water, people are now experiencing prolonged droughts, shortage of water. And like we've seen, I think, in the story that ran before, there are some steps that we can take. So there's responsibility that we can take at an individual level. But I think we must appreciate that there's a higher level where we need to have interventions. I think at the macro level, at the government level, There is room for policies that can really enable a significant shift in some of the practices we have. I'll talk about, for instance, water storage. We've just come from a prolonged period of El Nino where we had a lot of rainfall. And in fact, in some parts of the country, the challenge we had was too much water. And you can imagine now we are moving very quickly from having too much water to having too little, no water.
None, yeah.
And we have to look at the absurdity of that. And we live in a generation and in a period where there's a lot of technology that exists to do things as sophisticated as pull water from the air. All we need to do in Kenya is really look at how can we store that water better. When we have this rainfall that wreaks havoc in most parts of the country, and coincidentally, actually, the people that end up suffering the most when it rains are the people who typically don't have water. So I think at the macro level, first of all, the government has to step up in terms of looking at mega investment in water reservoirs, dams. If you've seen over the last decade the amount of transformation we've had in our road network, for example. We now have a railway connecting Mombasa and Nairobi.
Naivasha,
all the way to Naivasha, actually. Rural electrification. You know, in the last decade as well, we've seen, I think, there's been a significant increase in the number of people connected to the grid. We've not seen anything near that level of focus, level of investment in the area of water. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, I think there's a lot we can benefit from as a country if we invested in water. If we think about health, and this week I think there's been talk around the insurance scheme to cover people who are going to hospitals. But the reality is a lot of the ailments that are taking people to hospitals are preventable. If there was investment in accessing water and making sure that water is safe, we would not have that burden of disease that we have today. We are talking about food security. One of the reasons why we are not food secure as a country is because of the amount of water that is available for farmers. We are typically dependent on rain-fed agriculture. So the thing is, water has a very cross-cutting impact on our economy, and it's about time, I think, we saw more attention being paid to this, more investment coming in the area of water, not just at the national government, but even at the county government level, taking steps to really ensure that people have not just access to water, but more importantly for me, because that's the sector I come from, that water is safe, to make sure that we are also improving the health.
And you've mentioned something very critical, that in terms of there is having water security, which is a good thing, but then there is the other challenge of making sure that this water is suitable for consumption. Now here's a challenge where like when it was raining in Nairobi, I remember a while back there was big talk of we will buy boats for when it floods in Nairobi, but we didn't really see much talk into let's encourage people to buy these water tanks. Let's encourage them to have gutters on their roof lines so that they can tap this water and store it for not rainy days but for sunny days. And now as you talk in terms of the relationship between having water and having safe water, how important is this in terms of even the government in having a healthy nation?
I think that really has to be the foundation of our health policy and our health approach. Is can we first avoid or prevent diseases that are easily preventable? Because the cost of curing this disease, whether it's monetary, but also the cost on people's lives and the time and the quality of time that they have, is a real challenge. So I think the priority has to move back to there are ways we can prevent a lot of these diseases. And waterborne diseases certainly continue to be a major burden on our healthcare system. And that is easily addressed by ensuring that the water that people have is safe. The reality today is that a very small fraction of Kenyans are connected to piped water from the municipalities. But we also know even the water from the municipalities is not up to scratch. But the big percentage of Kenyans that then don't have this connection have to rely on water sources like springs, shallow wells that are contaminated and will continue to be more and more contaminated as population density increases. And unfortunately, we're also not handling our sanitation very well. So you have a lot of the human waste again contaminating the water that people are drinking. And so I think that there is need for us to really appreciate that for us to become a healthier nation, let us first look at things like the water we are drinking. Of course, look at nutrition and things like this. But when it comes to water, for sure, it's not just an issue of making sure everybody has access to water, but really looking at ways we can improve the quality of this water. Municipalities are going to play their part in ensuring that people are connected to water, and hopefully they can continue improving the quality of the water at the tap. But the reality is that there has to be other ways, especially in rural Kenya, where people may be a bit more sparsely populated. Infrastructure is not going to catch up with population increase anytime soon, where we need to have other interventions coming in. And there's been a lot of innovation in the area of household water treatment, for example. There are simple technologies that can help people make water that is contaminated very quickly to be water that is safe. But what we really need then to see is that there is a supportive structure, there is a supportive policy, there are incentives from the government, for example, around taxation, to ensure that as we help the government address this challenge. So for me, for example, coming in as a social entrepreneur with Aquaclara Kenya, it will really be beneficial to have some tax incentives that enable us to work alongside the government to ensure that we fast track the ability of the government to reach the target of providing safe water to everybody. But there is a role to be played, of course, by other players like financial institutions. Microfinance institutions can play a part in ensuring that they extend credit facilities for people to acquire some of these solutions like the water filters that we provide, or rainwater harvesting systems, the tanks and the gutters you are talking about. It's not going to be very easy for people in rural but even urban areas to buy these tanks that will cost maybe 90,000 shillings. But through financing from a bank or a microfinance institution, they're able to spread that payment over a period of time. And so that makes it more affordable and accessible.
Now, John, you've mentioned something very critical from when we started, the aspect of technology in addressing food security in the country, and not just not food security, water security, but not just water security, but also having safe water for whatever it is we need to do in our homes. Now, here's a question where these technologies that do exist, some say they are expensive to achieve, others don't even know what that these technologies do exist. Therefore, in terms of getting this message to the people, them to know whilst you can tap the water from your roof, you're now storing it, these are ways you can clean it for you to avoid going to a hospital. Now, how do we make sure that these technologies get to the people in such a manner that they understand and that they can afford it? Because affordability is another question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dennis. I think the first thing is an appreciation that not everybody in this country knows that the water they're drinking is what is making them sick. So at the very basic level, I think we have to really invest in educating our communities. Many people believe the water that is coming from the sky, rainwater, is coming straight from God. It can't make you sick. Even though the reality is that this water, before you drink it, is coming into contact with a roof that has dead lizards. If you open the tank looks very nasty because everything has been flushed into it.
Yeah.
So whereas the water may have come from God directly, as people tend to believe, the reality is that if you test that water, is actually very contaminated. Water from springs. You know, I've had communities that believe that this water, you know, our ancestors were drinking this water.
It's actually coming from the ancestors.
It's coming from the ancestors. You know, my grandfather drank this water and he lived to be 120. But the reality is that when your grandfather lived, you know, there was not so much of pollution of these water sources. People didn't settle around these springs. Forests were protected, they were respected. But with population increase, we are seeing encroachment of these water catchment areas, and there's a lot of pollution. And so there has to be first, I think, a lot of investment to educate our communities that the water you're drinking is what is making you sick. And for that, I'm happy that for us, for example, we've been able to partner with the Ministry of Health through the community health promoters who have been given this mandate to work within their communities to increase awareness on not just water, but things like malaria and things like this. And we want to see an acceleration of this across the country, where we have collaborations, private-public partnerships like what we have, to ensure that people are educated. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is, like I said, there's been a lot of technology breakthrough, different types of solutions that exist to make water safe. And it's also to appreciate that there are many different pollutants in this water, so it's not one solution, it's not a silver bullet. Every situation, every water may need a different solution. But the solutions do exist. So the challenge has been, how do we get, and that's the question you're asking, how do we get these solutions in the hands of the people that really need them? And that is where I think we have social enterprises like Aquaclara Kenya, and there are a few others that are coming up, that are looking at this gap, this social problem, as an opportunity, as a business opportunity. It used to be in the past that these types of challenges were left to charities. And you will have NGOs with very big hearts that come in with a lot of, good solutions, and then just dish them out to people who have no idea why they're taking them. But because it's free, of course, they're going to take as many as they're allowed to take.
A free thing is always sweet.
It is. I'll take a free thing anytime. But the reality was that you go back to these communities after a few weeks, you find that these solutions are not being put to use. And if it gets spoiled, people are saying, no, this thing is for the Mzungu that brought it. So the world has moved on. We need to start looking at these social problems as a business opportunity. So when you have social enterprises coming in, the idea is not, as it is for typical businesses, that the bottom line is just to make profit. The bottom line is, how do we create impact? How do we help our communities have safe water? But while doing that, how do we utilize a sustainable model? In this case, a business model.
And John, let me just pause there. As we come back, we continue with that conversation. Also, how we can take advantage of carbon credits to fund water security. And all that conversation coming after this short commercial break.